Tonight, you won't believe who Justin Trudeau just put in charge of Canada's consulates. It's December 8th. You're watching the Ezra Levant Show. Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
There's 8,500 customers here, and you won't give them an answer.
You come here once a year with a sign, and you feel morally superior.
The only thing I have to say to the government about why I publish it is because it's my bloody right to do so.
Dangerous news. Justin Trudeau just appointed a Saudi-born extremist, Omar Alghabra, to be Parliamentary Secretary to the Foreign Minister. He's now in charge of Canadian consular affairs, our consulates around the world. With thousands of Syrian migrants flooding into Canada and the risk of Islamic terrorism at an all-time high, this is a recipe for disaster. You see, Omar Alghabra says that terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah are not actually terrorist groups. He doesn't think they should be illegal in Canada. He doesn't think Canadian journalists should even be able to call them terrorists. He even opposes having a Canadian no-fly list. Just curious, because he himself was once stopped by U.S. agents when he wanted to fly to the States. And this guy is now in charge of Canadian consular affairs. He's the deputy, really, to the foreign minister. He's an official parliamentary secretary. Oh, but boy, does he hate Israel. He's pathological about it. He doesn't even think Canadian officials should visit Israel. He doesn't think Canadian officials should even participate in a Jewish charity walk in Toronto. He thinks Israel is, quote, cruel and brutal. Outrageous? Here, I'm going to give you the facts proving every assertion I've just made and more. Omar Alghabra was born in Saudi Arabia to Syrian parents, so basically the two most fascist, pro-terrorist places in the world. Now, it's possible that he couldn't wait to get out of there and come to Canada and embrace our values of liberty, equality of men and women, separation of mosque and state, things like that. But no. Once in Canada, he ran the Canadian Arab Federation, a group that is so anti-Semitic, it had its government funding cut off. They sued, but the courts ruled that, in fact, it was reasonable to call them anti-Semitic. Here, let me quote the Federal Court of Appeal. Quote, "There are mixed views about what constitutes anti-Semitism and whether the Federation's conduct could be perceived to be anti-Semitic. The federal court found the record was replete with articles and statements that supported the minister's characterization of the Federation." Yeah, you think? I said he doesn't think terrorist groups should be illegal. Here's proof. Here's Omar Alghabra's press release opposing the criminalization of terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. This is the man Justin Trudeau thinks will protect us. I said Alghabra doesn't think journalists should even be able to call terrorist groups terrorist groups. Here's proof of that. Here's his announcement declaring that he was taking a Canadian newspaper chain to the press council for the newspaper daring to add the word terrorist into wire stories to describe terrorists. Yeah, Alghabra isn't on Canada's side. A few years ago, Ontario police chiefs wanted to go to Israel to study counterterrorism from the people who do it every day. Omar Alghabra wanted to stop this. Seriously, here's what he wrote. "Sending the heads of Ontario police chiefs to benefit from Israeli security experience is like sending a Canadian parliamentarian delegation to learn from Saddam Hussein about democracy." What? He's equating the only Western liberal democracy in the region with a Muslim dictator and war criminal? That's bizarre. But the goal was the same: demonize Israel and stop our police from learning how to combat terrorism. But Alghabra didn't even like it when police went to a Jewish community event in Toronto called Walk with Israel. I've been to that one before. It's like a community party, a walk with a bit of a festival at the end, sort of like the St. Patrick's Day parade, but for Jews and people who like Israel, like a party in Little Italy, or like Chinese New Year. It's something that happens in Toronto. Omar Alghabra was against that. Here's what this little bigot wrote about that. He called this family march, quote, "a show of solidarity for a foreign state currently in the midst of an unresolved conflict, a country that is conducting a brutal and the longest contemporary military occupation in the world." So he wanted Toronto officials like the police chief to boycott the Jewish march. What a little anti-Semite. And he's now the junior foreign minister. Yeah, I feel safe. He loves calling Israel brutal. while he defends Muslim terrorist groups. This isn't just stuff he said when he was the leader of the anti-Semitic Canadian Arab Federation way back when. I mean, just last year, when Israel finally struck back at the Hamas terrorists in the Gaza Strip, who had been raining rockets down on Israeli civilians, Alghabra wrote a Facebook post calling Israel, once again, blind and cruel. But not a word against the Hamas attacks on Israeli civilians that started it. In fact, when the arch-terrorist Yasser Arafat died, Omar Alghabra announced that he was in mourning. Seriously, he was grieving. Alghabra has been a senior organizer for Justin Trudeau. His job description was one line long: get every Muslim in Canada to vote for Trudeau. So anytime Trudeau went to a city, he would visit the mosque. Occasionally, he'd visit a synagogue or church too, but more frequently there was a mosque visit, almost always without media presence. No mosque was too extreme for him. He even went to the Wahhabi mosque in Montreal, the one funded by Saudi Arabia, fingered by the Pentagon as a recruiting mosque for terrorists. Here, listen to Trudeau boast about that.
I spend a lot of time running from the Bangladeshi to the Pakistani to the Maghrebien to the Asuna Wahhabi mosque. I cover all the different communities.
It's incredible what Alghabra got Trudeau to do, even to dress up like a medieval desert tribesman. Trudeau prayed a Muslim prayer called the Shahada, which under Sharia law is the requirement to convert to Islam. Now, I don't believe that Trudeau converted to Islam, but Alghabra knows what symbols to use, like this picture of Trudeau's mother and wife wearing hijabs. Well, the campaign worked, and Alghabra, after the election, was given his reward. And now Trudeau says he'll immediately withdraw our CF-18 jets from the Allied coalition against the Islamic State terrorists. And Trudeau says he'll repeal the law stripping Canadian citizenship from convicted terrorists who were dual citizens. And Trudeau says he's in favor of Muslim women wearing face-obscuring niqabs in citizenship courts. But what's next, now that Alghabra is a junior foreign minister himself? How will Syrian migrants to Canada be vetted? Will Alghabra's view that Hamas and Hezbollah aren't really terrorists, will that view govern how we vet Muslim migrants? What role will Alghabra have in making those decisions? After all, he's in charge of the consulates. How about our relations with Muslim extremist countries? Here's what Alghabra told Al Jazeera before the election. He said, quote, "On the issue of Iran, Trudeau has clearly stated that he is for engagement. He's also criticized Harper's government policy as being unhelpful in the Middle East and said that it ceases to be useful." Is Alghabra pressuring Trudeau to renew diplomatic relations with Iran, to cool relations with Israel? How about creeping Sharia law here in Canada? In an Arabic interview, Alghabra once said, and I quote, "Unfortunately, the majority of Muslims remained silent during the research of this law and abandoned the field to a dissenting minority of Muslims, which had a louder voice. As a result, this plan ended in failure. The problem was not a stand taken by non-Muslims against Muslims, but it was we Muslims who were divided among ourselves and disunited in our ranks." Omar Alghabra wanted Sharia law. What other advice is Alghabra giving to Trudeau about Sharia law, about anything? Omar Alghabra is not a Muslim moderate. He is a Muslim supremacist who hates Israel, opposes anti-terrorism work done by our police, and even tries to censor Canadian journalists. He says it's unfortunate Sharia law isn't in effect here. When Justin Trudeau promised real change, I'm not sure this is what most Canadians thought he meant. If you're concerned about Omar Alghabra being in charge of Canadian government policy, and if you're worried it will mean tens of thousands of other Muslim supremacists, radicals, coming into Canada in the name of being refugees, sign our petition at refugeepause.ca. Canada has already taken in more than 500,000 Muslim migrants in the past 10 years. How about we just take a pause for a bit while we integrate them and teach them that, unlike Omar Alghabra, real Canadians aren't apologists for terrorists. Stay with us, more ahead. Boy, I wish I was in Paris last night, not to go to the global warming conference that the UN is hosting, but to go to this black tie, red carpet affair instead. Take a look.
We're here on the streets of downtown Paris, and we're about to have our movie premiere tonight, which is Monday, December 7th. We're going to have our big red carpet premiere. This morning, we're greeted with wanted posters. We are being called the criminals de climate, climate criminals, and these wanted posters are all over the city. Hold that for me, please. Hi, I'm Marc Morano. Welcome to the world premiere of Climate Hustle.
It's too scientific.
All right. Oh, man, that looks amazing. Well, I couldn't be there, but the next best thing is to talk to Marc Marano himself. He's the publisher of ClimateDepot.com, the folks who just released their new film, Climate Hustle, and he joins us via Skype from the City of Lights. Hey, Marc, great to see you again.
Thank you, Ezra. Happy to be here, live from Paris. This is it's been a wild week here in Paris. They don't like dissent here at all.
Well, it looked like you were having a blast. I saw the stretch SUV limos, the Hummers. That's hilarious. What was that bicycle thing you did at first? Why were you on a bike and then on a Hummer? I missed that.
I was mimicking Hollywood. They drive around in their Priuses and act all green, and then they own 3 mansions. I don't have 3 mansions, so we had a Hummer SUV, so I thought I would offset it by riding a bike.
Offset it, that's hilarious. Well, it looked like a lot of fun. I recognized some of the faces there. Lord Monckton, the great global warming skeptic, was there. It looks like you actually had a really great event. I mean, tell me a little bit about it. Tell me about the theater, tell me about the film, tell me about the night. And also tell me about the protesters and those wanted pictures.
Yes, well, actually, the wanted pictures kicked off the day of our premiere. And actually, because of those wanted posters, we got interviewed by the New York Times. And the New York Times ended up promoting our film. The New York Times reported on its gray lady pages yesterday that the show must go on. We were going through with the premiere tomorrow night, despite the wanted threat. I was joking that I was going to have a stunt double walk the red carpet because I was in a secure, undisclosed location because I was under threat here in Paris. So we had that begin the day. And we had a 100-year-old theater in downtown Paris. This is a beautiful theater with a balcony. It's the old school theater built, I think, 1907 or so. We had a packed, overbooked house. We were turning people away at the door. We had the protesters show up an hour early. The protesters out there giving out lumps of coal because the idea is that, we promote, global warming skeptics want coal to continue. We don't want solar and wind, allegedly. So they were handing out coal. Some of them a little bit wild and drunk. They started shoving people. So the theater called the police. We had the police show up. The police then tried to wrangle up the protesters. Then we had instead of our Hollywood celebrities, we had the PhD skeptical scientists walk the red carpet and come on in, pose for pictures, and then we had a reception. And then we had the film. Yeah, and you're seeing there's some of the police that showed up on the scene. And they restored order pretty quickly, but it was about an hour of chaos. I like to say it was police, protesters, and chaos. Just what you'd expect from a Climate Hustle premiere in Paris.
Well, congratulations on pulling off the event. Congratulations on the theater for not buckling under pressure from these censors. It's so ironic. It's such a vast disproportion of activists and scientists are on the global warming worriers side. You'd think they would accept, the few voices on the skeptical side, but it's almost like they want absolute, total subservience and submission to their point of view. The very fact that you disagree with them, they find deeply troubling. And I put it to you, Marc, the fact that they would want to silence you, stop you, shut you down, shows that they don't have a scientific approach. They don't believe in academic freedom. And I think their approach to you, threats, trying to criminalize you, trying to shut you down, proves that their arguments must be brittle. Who ever heard of truth needing protesters to get the word out?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. The protest signs are in a way funny, but it's very serious because in the United States, we have Senator Whitehouse from Connecticut pursuing RICO statutes against global warming skeptics. We have lead global warming scientists taking millions in taxpayer money, turning around, signing letters urging his colleagues who don't agree with him to be investigated under RICO. Something smells when you can't have a scientific debate and you start getting your opponents, getting the police to investigate them and getting the strong arm of government on them. And that's why these wanted posters, for calling us climate criminals. We've had people call for Nuremberg trials. We have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the Climate Hustle film talking about skeptics going to jail at The Hague and getting 3 square meals a day and a cot like the other war criminals. So these people are seriously advocating it. It's not a joke.
We saw that same thing in Canada just last week. A foreign-funded lobby group called Eco-Justice demanded investigations and even criminal penalties and 10-year gag orders on people for merely putting up posters saying, change your mind. Just incredible. All right, enough about the protesters. They're fun to talk about because they're so kooky, but let's talk about the real news, which is the debut of Climate Hustle. You and I have talked a little bit about the film before. Tell me some basic details about it. It's a documentary, but with a sense of humor. It's entertaining and scientific. Like, who would it be for? Would it be for guys like me? Would it be for laymen? Do you need to be scientific in your background to like it?
No, actually, we made this for the layman. We're going after the soccer moms, if you will, the Starbucks customers. We want this film. We have tons of media clips. It's for the layperson, and it's entertainment. I want people to think of it as a global warming comedy. It's humor. It's entertainment with a serious message. And the audience last night bore that out. And we had a lot of local French people and other just locals here who weren't necessarily all schooled and up on the latest global warming debate. They really were laughing and enjoying the film. And I think when people see this, they'll see. Now, aside from the humor, it's a very serious message of politically left scientists re-examining the evidence and declaring themselves skeptical. And then we delve into how their colleagues react and how they're ostracized. So there's a lot of different elements here in this film.
Well, that's great. How long is the film, by the way?
About 75 minutes.
75 minutes. You and I have talked briefly about how we can help spread the word. I haven't seen the film yet. I'd very much like to. I couldn't make it to Paris for the debut. What are your plans? I think you mentioned you were going to have a screening in the United States. Do you think we could talk to you about getting a screening in Canada, like at a theater in Toronto and in Calgary and Edmonton, maybe?
Absolutely, yeah. We're looking at U.S. theatrical distribution early 2016, and then that would be Canadian distribution at the same time, and then it would go to television and then DVD on demand. So we're looking in the next, hopefully the next month and a half to 2 months getting this out in the theaters. This was like the sneak preview early release here in Paris, and then the real release will come in early 2016.
Yeah, like at a film festival. Well, listen, I want to talk to you offline about how we can get it for our people on our website, because that's our primary way of communicating with people. All right, now let me ask you this. Did any of the troublemakers, the censors, the muzzlers, did any of them manage to make it in to the theater? And if so, did they watch the film and learn anything, or did they disrupt, or did none of them go in?
No, we actually had, the theater had 2 security guards. And we had it tightly wound because we wanted people that we allowed media in, and the media were there. We had wire services and other things, and they actually did some mainstream media reviews of the film, which was interesting.
And what did they say? Give me a few nuggets from them.
The media, the negative mainstream media is, this is the skeptics' same old arguments, and they ignored the fact all the new scientists we presented and the politically left scientists and all the data we presented. But we also had Breitbart News there, and we got a very positive review there that actually goes through and details all the stuff on this. But I think we were no protesters made it inside because of our security. But we'll have plenty of opportunity for that in the future going forward here. We actually have, and I'll be posting on this, a top UN scientist has already called the film propaganda without even seeing it. So we've already got a lot of reviews of people who haven't seen it.
Isn't that funny? They're judging a book by its cover. They refuse to even listen to the other side, which again is a denial of the scientific philosophy and method. Listen, Marc, I know you're busy out there in Paris holding these guys to account. Thanks for making time for us via Skype. Keep us posted. And let me say right now, here at The Rebel, we're committed to giving you distribution, whether it's in theaters or finding a way to get it on our website. We'll work together on this one, my friend.
We'll talk to you about that. Thank you.
Sounds great. Okay, that's Marc Morano from ClimateDepot.com. Stay with us. More after the break.
Looking for the perfect gift? Did you know ThRebel.media has a store? Make a statement with a t-shirt. Have your morning coffee in a Fearless Travel coffee mug. There's even an Ezra Levant bobblehead. It's a one-stop shop for the perfect gift. And don't forget to pick up something for yourself. Go to ThRebel.media/store to find out more.
Welcome back. You know, we talk a lot about Alberta because the new NDP government there is a disaster that's fresh, but there's been a long-time disaster here in Ontario. Monte McNaughton joins me now. He's the official opposition critic for economic development, member of the Progressive Conservative Party. Monte, I can't even count how long Ontario has been in disaster mode. The Liberals have been in power here for how many years? Is it 10?
About 12 years
12 years now. Enough to turn it into a have-not province.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. The deficits continue every single year. Our debt in the province is set to hit $300 billion. It's shocking.
That's the largest debt of anything that's not a country of its own in the world.
You're right.
That's crazy. You know, it's sad because, I mean, growing up as a kid in Alberta, we always thought, well, Ontario is the engine of the country. It's the biggest, the richest. You know, we in Alberta like to, you know, think of ourselves as big too, but Ontario being a have-not province is so, it's like opposite day. It should not be that way, but it goes to the political culture. I mean, it's not that suddenly Ontario doesn't have industrious people. It's not that suddenly Ontario doesn't have mines or forests or things. It's the political culture's changed.
That's true. We have unlimited opportunity in the province of Ontario. Unfortunately, under Dalton McGuinty, now Kathleen Wynne, they continue to make political decisions that's driving Ontario further and further behind, and it's unfortunate for the families out there.
You know, we started a campaign recently called FireBob.ca. It's about Bob Chiarelli, the energy minister. I can't believe the power prices, and it's not a blip. This is like a 20-year escalator. These prices are going to go up. If folks haven't signed yet, go to FireBob.ca. But I want to talk to you about something fresh this week, a fresh scandal, and I think Ontarians might be getting numb to them. There's so often. The Auditor General's report has said that corporate welfare, like the $1 million checks to cronies of the government, well, you tell me, what did the Auditor General's report say? I want to hear it straight from you.
Well, it was a scathing report. Of course, the Auditor General talked about the electricity problems in that ministry, but they highlighted that $1.5 billion was handed out to companies across the province with no applications. I think that speaks to the cronyism
so they
that
didn't
we're
fill
seeing.
out a form, they just got a check.
No paperwork. In 90% of the cases, the companies didn't need
I got to fill out
funding.
I got to fill out a form for anything with this guy. I got to fill out like 10 forms for a driver's license or for registration. So you're saying I got to fill out more paperwork to get a driver's license than people had to fill out to get millions of dollars?
Absolutely. Yeah, 90% of the funding that was handed out, the companies didn't need the money, and they didn't even want the money, but the government still handed it.
How do you go from not needing and not wanting money to getting money and not even having to fill out a form? Like that sounds so crooked. What did the Auditor General say? Did she say there was actual crimes going on? How did she explain it? Because the idea of giving someone money from the taxpayer's treasury that doesn't need it without paperwork, if that happened in a private sector company, there would probably be charges of embezzlement or fraud. What did the Auditor General say?
Well, the Auditor General said that there was no application process. Money was handed out from essentially a Liberal list.
They were Liberals.
Well, we're looking into that, but I said in question period that this is crony capitalism at its best, and the danger of politicians handing out blank checks essentially to companies is dangerous, and it's not in the best interest of taxpayers.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, in businesses, the idea of sending out a check without even an invoice is just unheard of. But you try and measure, okay, we spent $1 million, 10 million, $1 billion. What did we get? If a company didn't need it, didn't want it, there's no paperwork, how do you know if it worked? Unless the working part was just giving money to your friends, then you know it worked because you gave them the money and that's the end of the story.
Yeah, that's another thing the Auditor General highlighted, that there was no checks and balances in the process, so taxpayers don't know if there was any value to those grants being given, no idea how many jobs were created. We just know that $1.5 billion was spent, no oversight, and no accountability to the program.
You know, what irritates me is that so few people on the left in politics have a background in the private sector. I mean, in Alberta, there's not a single, let me take that back. In the entire caucus, there are 2 people who have had private sector experience, 2 out of their entire caucus, and they're not in cabinet. So every single cabinet minister in Alberta either comes from government or a union background. So to them, they don't know what business means. They think business is all corrupt because they hate business. So when they're in power, they think, oh, well, this is how business is done. You just cut money to your buddies because we hate capitalism, we don't understand it, so we're going to do it as a parody, like as someone who hates capitalism thinks capitalism is government's cutting checks. That's what they do.
Well, and that's what we're seeing here in Ontario, that attitude where politicians think that they can pick winners and losers in the economy, and taxpayers get shafted every time.
Give me an example. I just want one example of, I haven't gone through the Auditor General's report, I've just seen the headlines. Is there an example from there of just, I mean, it's all stupid, but is there a super stupid case that stands out?
Yeah, 2. One, there's a company that was handed a $2.7 million grant to build wind turbines on residential properties, including on roofs of houses. That company has gone out of business and took the money and ran.
But that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard that the minister's office was told not to give the money out, but they gave it anyways.
I'm not a wind expert, but even now, that doesn't make sense. I mean, in the city, a windmill at a mini golf course, that's about the only place. What's the other example?
Secondly, they were handing out grants to the Liberals for up to $130,000 per job. That's what taxpayers are on the hook for.
And who got that?
It was a company out of Toronto, a software company.
And I take it the jobs were paying less than, I mean, that's a very high salary. So they were paying more than the job actually. So it was just a gift to the company.
Yeah, I think the average employee makes about $55,000 a year.
So just a complete gift to the company.
Yeah, this is crony capitalism at its best.
It's not like the high-tech industry is undercapitalized. I mean, the tech industry, the .com, the internet industry, there are hundreds of billions of dollars flowing around in Toronto, in Vancouver, in San Francisco, in New York. If you've got an idea, you've got to be a bit of a loser to go to the Ontario government if no one else will give you money for your .com. But I guess if they're handing out free money, why not? Why not?
Yeah, a lot of companies at the trough, I'm sure, in Ontario.
Unbelievable. Monte McNaughton, good to see you. Keep up the fight. I hope that I will live long enough to break the Liberal rule over this province. It will take a long time to fix the holes they've been drilling in the bottom of the boat. I don't even know how long it'll pay down the $1/3 of $1 trillion debt. But the first rule of holes is when you're in one, stop digging. Hopefully you guys will do that.
Thanks.
Nice to see you, Monte.
Nice to see you.
All right, folks, stay with us. More.
Ontario residents are being hosed on electricity prices. The latest Auditor General's report says we've been overcharged by $37 billion over the last several years. That works out to nearly $2,800 for every man, woman, and child. Why? Mismanagement and bad policy choices from the Ontario Liberals. It's going to cost us billions more in coming years. Energy Minister Bob Chiarelli won't take responsibility. He's lashing out. It's time for Bob to go. If you agree, go to firebob.ca. That's firebob.ca and make your voice heard.
Hey, welcome back to the show. My favorite part is your viewer feedback. Here is a doozy by Dan, who writes, I've been spreading the rebel word and fighting the good fight. I'm a huge fan of the show and think you and your entire crew are doing a great job. I even decided to step up my game, made myself a little makeshift office, and will be decorating it soon with a bunch of things from your site store. Every morning I watch the major news sources, including the CBC. After my shock and disgust passes, I then look up what the Rebel has to say to cheer me up. It gives me hope that you're growing. Attached is a video of what I do when watching how Canada is being destroyed. Hope you enjoy it. And Dan sent along this hilarious video. Take a look.
Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
War Canada.
500 customers here, and we won't give them an answer. You come here once a year with a sign, and you feel morally superior. The only thing I have to say is government will want it.
War Canada.
Because it's my bloody right to do so.
Dan, that was hilarious. Thank you very much for sending that video. By the way, if that's how you watch the show, I should tell you that's how I write my own commentaries too. DJ Oates writes, thanks for another great show, Ezra. It seems that the production value gets better every day. Eventually, you'll have to start producing monthly compilations of your hate mail responses. The wife and I always get a chuckle from them. Keep up the great work. Hey, that's nice of you to say. I'm glad you're noticing the little things we tweak to get things better. We have a new piece of technology called New Tech Talk Show that is helping with the quality of our Skype interviews. I think they look great, by the way. So thanks for that. Speaking of hate mail, this next one isn't really hate mail. It's sort of just a weird note I got from Scott Gilmore. Before I show you his note, just a reminder, I talked about him yesterday. Scott Gilmore is the husband of Canada's new Liberal Environment Minister, Catherine McKenna, and he is a columnist at Maclean's magazine. Apparently that's not a conflict for them. And he wrote a whole column about the San Bernardino terrorist attacks without using the words terrorist or Islam or Muslim at all. He also got a bunch of factual errors wrong, but that's not the main point. The main point is, how do you write a whole column about San Bernardino without saying the word terrorism? Like that's a really propaganda mission. Like that's a challenge, right? That'd be like writing about 9/11 without saying Al-Qaeda. How do you do that? So I did my video on him yesterday, and then I started tweaking him a bit on Twitter, and I noticed that Maclean's, after I had done my video, I went to the article again, and I noticed that Maclean's had fixed the 3 factual errors that I pointed out. Oh, that felt good. So I said, well, hang on, shouldn't you acknowledge your correction that you got some factual errors wrong? And by the way, how do you still write a whole piece about terrorism without saying terrorism? Anyway, Scott Gilmore tweeted back to me. He said, Ezra, ad hominem attacks are beneath you. Give me a ring at 646, blah, blah, blah. You give me his phone number. We can chat. I don't want a personal relationship with Scott Gilmore. I'm not looking for a chit chat. And it's really weird that he tweeted his private Manhattan phone number. What you do with a Manhattan phone number? So he's just like it's just weird to me. He's an Ottawa pundit, married to the federal environment minister, but he's got this Manhattan phone, and he wants me to call it to talk about things. And I don't want to have personal relationships. I just want him to explain why, to the world, not to me personally. This is not a personal endeavor. I want him to explain why he wrote a whole column about terrorism without saying the word terrorism. And I want him to explain why they corrected all their factual errors in Maclean's without a correction. They just went back and fixed them. I think Scott Gilmore is a little bit weird. And I think his wife is weird in the same way. They're both what I call virtue signalers. They're the kind of people who, as far as I know, don't actually do things. Like she jets around the world while she says she's against carbon dioxide. He actually wrote a column in Maclean's calling for 200,000 Syrian migrants. Pretty sure they haven't taken one into their home. They're what I call virtue signalers. They tell people how great they are, not by what they do, but they'll outbid each other for, I'll cut carbon this amount. No, I'll take 200,000 Syrians. I think that's probably why they were attracted to each other. That's the new Trudeau value. Not really accomplishment or achievement, but having all the buzzwords down and signaling that you're morally superior to the world. Anyways, what do you think of that? Maybe Scott Gilmore will send me a private email and want to chat about it. You can send me an email. I'll read it on the air if it's fan mail or hate mail. Ezra at ThRebel.media. Facebook us, as you can see there. Or you can tweet to me just at Ezra Levant. I'll do my best to read some of the fun ones. That's it for the show today. Big show tomorrow. That's it for now. Ezra Levant at ThRebel.media. See you tomorrow.